Ever get that feeling? Like you're digging through a mountain of information, trying to find that one golden nugget that unlocks it all.
Yeah, we've all been there.
That's what we're all about in these deep dives.
Absolutely. Finding those key insights and really exploring them.
And today, we're tackling something pretty fundamental, I think. I mean, it's about how we connect as humans.
It is, yeah. We're talking about the power of stories.
Storytelling,
Yeah.
exactly. And our expert guide for this deep dive is Tom A. Steffen.
Oh, interesting.
He's a professor of intercultural studies, spent like 2 decades in the Philippines, which is incredible.
Wow, 2 decades.
Yeah. And that experience, it really shaped his thinking on why communicating through stories is so powerful.
Especially when you're dealing with something as profound as, like, core beliefs, right?
Exactly. And that's what's so fascinating about Steffen's perspective. It comes from, like, real-world experience,
Oh, so it's not just theoretical stuff.
Not at all. It grew out of his own efforts to share his faith.
I see.
He started out with this very structured approach to evangelism. Super systematic.
Yeah.
Very step-by-step.
Okay, so like a logical progression of ideas.
Exactly. He started with the Bible, then moved to God, Satan, humanity, sin, judgment.
Okay, I'm following.
The whole 9 yards. And finally, the culmination is Jesus Christ.
Makes sense. Like, build the case, reach the conclusion.
Exactly. It seems super straightforward, right?
It does, yeah.
Like, it should be easy to follow. And Steffen wanted to make sure people not only understood these ideas, but could explain them to others.
So it was about, like, really deep comprehension, not just surface-level understanding.
Yeah. But here's the thing. He found that this approach, it just wasn't clicking with the Ifugao people he was trying to reach.
Oh, interesting. So what was the issue? Was it like a language barrier?
It wasn't the language itself. It was more like the abstract nature of his presentations.
Oh.
It was hard for them to grasp.
It's kind of like when you try to explain a really complicated concept and it just goes over people's heads,
Totally. And even harder for them to then turn around and explain those ideas to someone else.
You could almost picture it, can't you? You're trying to be so clear and systematic.
I know, right?
And it just falls flat.
You put in all that work and it's like, wait, nobody's getting this.
Yeah, we've all had those moments, whether it's like explaining a project at work or just trying to get a friend to understand your new favorite band.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like you're speaking different languages, even though you're using the same words.
Exactly. So what did Steffen do?
Well, he realized he needed a new approach, right? A different way of connecting.
Okay.
So he started sharing these Old Testament stories, like really foundational narratives.
Right. What?
Creation, the fall, Cain and Abel, the flood, the Exodus, the big ones.
Okay, the classic story.
Yeah. And the change, it was like night and day.
Wow, so it worked.
He describes it as phenomenal. Like his sessions just came alive.
That's awesome.
But even more than that, the people he was sharing these stories with, they became instant evangelists.
Oh, wow. So they weren't just getting it. They were excited to share it, too.
Exactly. They weren't just memorizing facts. They were embodying the message. They were sharing these stories with others and doing it effectively.
That's powerful. It shows how stories can really resonate in a way that just, like, bullet points can't.
It really is. And, it makes you think, why do stories connect so deeply? Why do we remember them, share them, even build our lives around them?
Right. What is it about a narrative that grabs us?
I think it's that aha moment. When something clicks and you're like, I get it.
And you just have to tell someone else.
Exactly. So Steffen, after this experience, he goes deep into researching the power of storytelling, like across all sorts of fields.
Not just religion.
Right. He finds that it's not just this handy tool for evangelism. It's a core element of communication everywhere.
Like where?
Oh, everywhere. Like management, healthcare, even academics.
Really?
Yeah, in fields like apologetics, theology, anthropology, they all use storytelling.
That's interesting. So why do you think, then, that storytelling sometimes gets a bad rap, especially in religious circles?
Well, Steffen points out that in some areas of Christian work, particularly evangelism, it's become a bit of a lost art.
A lost art.
Yeah. He observes that a lot of people prefer these more direct, propositional arguments.
Oh, I see. So like laying out spiritual laws, trying to prove them logically.
Right. Very intellectual, very heady.
Which makes sense. You want to present a clear, well-reasoned case.
Absolutely.
Ah.
But when you step back, it feels a bit off, doesn't it? Like we don't experience life as a series of propositions.
No, we don't. We're drawn to narratives.
Exactly. Think about how much we love movies, novels, even the way news is presented.
It's all about the story.
Right. Steffen argues that character, real character, isn't built on just knowing doctrines or creeds.
Yeah, it's about how those beliefs play out in real life, in messy situations.
Exactly. Stories bring those principles to life. They give us characters and situations we can relate to, connect with emotionally.
And that's what makes it stick, right? It's not just an intellectual exercise anymore.
Exactly. And, sometimes people say storytelling is like a waste of time.
Oh, I've heard that, like it's frivolous or something.
Yeah, like just entertainment. But Steffen suggests that it's actually the opposite.
How so?
He says that stories are what allow us to connect with those deeper, more significant issues. They provide a framework for understanding.
So it's not just about entertainment, it's about meaning.
Precisely. And that brings us to, I think, one of his most important points, which is the universal appeal of storytelling.
Universal, huh?
Yeah. He says no matter where you go in the world, people love to hear and tell stories.
It's a common thread that runs through all of us.
It really is. It crosses all boundaries of age, culture, you name it.
We use stories to make sense of our experiences.
To share a laugh, offer comfort, even to challenge each other.
It's woven into the fabric of how we interact. It's how we connect.
It is. And, it's not just about telling stories. Steffen emphasizes that over half the world's population, they actually learn best through concrete examples, through stories and symbols,
Okay.
rather than abstract ideas.
Oh, that's interesting. So like visual learners.
Exactly. Think about parables, right?
Yeah.
Like the parable of the lost sheep.
Yeah.
It's not just about a literal sheep. It's a symbol.
It represents something bigger.
Exactly. God's care for individuals, stories, they often have these powerful symbols embedded within them, and they resonate on a much deeper level than just straight-up facts.
Makes sense. Stories can bypass our intellectual defenses and speak directly to our hearts.
And this ties into a bigger trend too, the rise of visual media, like television, right? It's probably contributing to this preference for concrete learning, shorter attention spans, image-driven content. It's becoming the norm.
It's how we're wired now.
And Steffen, he raises this really important point. If we rely too heavily on abstract, literary-based communication, we risk missing a huge chunk of the world.
So we need to adapt our methods, meet people where they are.
Absolutely. Think about how people actually take in information.
Right.
And stories, they're powerful because they engage not just our minds, but our emotions too.
Oh, for sure. A good story makes you feel something.
It does. They give us the specifics, the who, what, when, where. But they also stir up those feelings, joy, sadness, fear, hope.
It's that emotional connection that makes the message hit harder,
It does. It does. It makes it so much more impactful and memorable than just a dry list of facts.
Way more memorable. Like you said, stories stick with you.
They do. Stephanie even quotes this guy, Herbert Schneider. He says stories have a way of tapping those feelings that we habitually anesthetize.
Wow, that's deep.
It's true, though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
We get so busy we shut down emotionally. But a good story, it can break through those walls.
It makes you feel again.
It does.
Yeah.
And it's because stories, they often mirror our own lives. That blend of facts and feelings, it allows us to see ourselves in the characters in their journeys.
It's like holding up a mirror to our own experiences.
It is. And that sparks our imagination. It makes learning not just informative, but truly transformative.
You're not just passively absorbing information, you're actively engaging with it.
You are. And when you look at the Bible itself, Steffen points out something pretty interesting.
What's that?
About 75% of it is narrative. It's story.
Wow, I never thought about it like that.
It's wild, right?
Yeah.
And only about 15% is poetry. And then a tiny 10% is those logical arguments.
Like Paul's letters.
Exactly. Which, as Westerners, we tend to gravitate towards.
Right. The logic, the structure, it's familiar.
It is. But Steffen asks us this really thought-provoking question. If God chose to communicate most of his message through story, what does that say about this approach?
It's like he's saying, pay attention to how I'm communicating.
Exactly. Maybe we could be taking a cue from that.
Maybe we should be telling more stories ourselves.
And, it's not just a Christian thing either. Steffen points out that every major religion, they all use stories extensively.
Makes sense.
To teach, attract new followers, keep people engaged.
Stories have a way of bringing people together, creating a shared understanding.
They do. He gives this example of how Paul, when he was preaching, he would tailor his stories to his audience.
Oh, that's smart. So like different stories for different people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When he was speaking to Jewish audiences, he'd reference those familiar heroes, Abraham, Moses, David.
Those are the big names.
They are. But when he was speaking to Gentiles, He'd often start with the creation story.
Something more universal. Everyone can relate to that.
Exactly. It's like he was trying to find that common ground, that point of connection.
That makes sense.
In stories, they can be a really powerful way to address, like, deeply held beliefs and behaviors.
Because they're less confrontational, right?
Exactly. It's not you versus me. It's us exploring this idea together through this narrative.
It's like slipping in a bit of wisdom under the radar.
It is. And going back to Steffen's experience in the Philippines, remember how those people became instant evangelists?
Yeah.
He emphasizes how stories, they create that phenomenon.
It's like people can't help but share a good story.
They can't. The Ifugao people, even before they fully embraced the Christian faith, they were retelling those Bible stories they'd heard.
That's amazing.
It really is. The narrative itself, it was captivating.
Yeah.
And it was easily shared.
And that's the beauty of it, right? Stories spread organically.
They do. And then, of course, there's Jesus himself. Steffen reminds us that Jesus, he never wrote a systematic theology.
No, he didn't. He taught through stories.
He did. And he taught profound truths, too, through parables.
Those stories, they made people think differently about their lives.
They did. About their traditions, their relationship with God.
They challenged the status quo.
They did. And they weren't always easy to hear. They often made people uncomfortable.
They demanded a response.
They did. They weren't passive entertainment.
Yeah.
They were meant to lead to a real encounter.
A real encounter with God.
Exactly. And this idea that stories, they spark a reaction, they lead to change. It's echoed in the work of this guy, D. Bruce Graham.
Okay.
Steffen quotes him. Graham talks about how societies understand their history, who they are, through their stories.
It's like a collective narrative that shapes our identity.
It is. And he says that the biblical story, it can offer meaning and purpose.
But only if it connects with people's existing worldview.
Right. It has to resonate with their hopes, their understanding of reality.
It can't just be imposed from the outside.
Exactly. And Graham uses this really interesting analogy. You know that movie, The Gods Must Be Crazy?
Yeah, I remember that one.
He talks about the Coke bottle. You know how it drops from the sky?
And it disrupts their whole way of life.
Exactly. He uses that as a metaphor for how new information gets interpreted through our existing framework. Like, for the biblical story to take hold, it can't just be about individual conversions.
It has to be about a much bigger shift.
It does. A shift in how people see the world, finding their place in God's story.
It's about transformation.
It is.
Mm.
And, you know, this requires storytellers who, like, really understand the whole narrative.
And can communicate it in a way that makes sense to people.
Exactly. It's not just about knowing the facts, it's about knowing the heart of the story.
And knowing the hearts of the people you're sharing it with.
And Steffen saw this firsthand in India.
Mm.
He was working with students who were memorizing all these Bible facts,
Okay.
but they weren't necessarily connecting with the overarching story.
The bigger picture.
Yeah. And it was when they started exploring the entire biblical narrative inductively, like really looking for the main message within each story, that their worldview started to change.
So it was about finding the threads that connected everything together.
Exactly. It was about understanding the why, not just the what. But knowing the story, that's only half the battle, isn't it?
Right.
They have to learn how to tell it effectively.
And that means understanding your audience, right?
Absolutely. Understanding their concerns, their interests, their own stories.
Because everyone has a story.
They do. So Steffen, instead of relying on these outside perspectives, he encouraged his students to really immerse themselves in the local culture.
To get to know the people.
Yeah. Spend time with them, understand their traditions,
Oh.
and then creatively share the biblical story in ways that felt familiar.
So like meeting them where they are.
Exactly. And he used all sorts of methods: songs, drama, pictures, storytelling itself. It's about connecting God's story with their story.
Finding that point of intersection.
Exactly. And finally, Steffen brings in this guy, Leland Reichen, who asks some really thought-provoking questions.
Like what?
Like, why does the Bible contain so many stories?
That is a good question.
Right. What unique truths do they reveal that other forms of writing can't?
Interesting.
And how does our understanding of God change when we encounter him in a narrative versus just, like, theological statements?
It's a different kind of knowing, isn't it?
It is. It engages a different part of us.
Mm.
So to bring it all home, what are the key takeaways for you, our listeners?
Well, we've seen that storytelling is a universal language.
It really is.
A large part of the world prefers to learn through stories and symbols.
It's how we're wired.
It connects with our emotions, our imagination, in ways that just listing principles can't.
Stories make us feel, they make us think, they stay with us.
They do. And we've explored how prevalent story is in the Bible itself.
It's the primary way God chose to communicate.
And how effectively it's used in all major religions.
It's a powerful tool for teaching and connecting.
And we talked about how stories, they create those instant evangelists.
Because they're so easy to share.
They are. And how Jesus himself, he was a master storyteller.
Using parables to teach deep truths and challenge the way people saw the world.
Ultimately, understanding the power of story, learning to communicate effectively through narrative, it can really transform how we connect with others and share important ideas.
In all areas of our lives. It can. So here's a final thought for you to chew on. Thinking about how powerfully stories resonated with the Ifugao people, how they've shaped worldviews throughout history.
Yeah.
What stories might be most impactful for the people you're trying to connect with? And how can you learn to tell those stories effectively? Think about the power of narrative in your own life.
And how you can use it to build bridges and share what matters most.
Exactly.
Good stuff.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.